I was sitting at the back of the ballroom when the bride raised her champagne glass and said, "I saved him from that broken woman." People laughed. They actually laughed. Some clinked glasses. Others nodded, smiling like she had just delivered the punchline of the night. I could feel my face flush, not from shame, but from the heat of every buried memory rising to the surface. My stomach turned, but I stayed seated. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. Then, through the glitter and noise, a waitress stepped forward. She moved slowly, like she was walking through water. She reached the center of the room, right by the head table, and without saying a word she took off her cap, held it in her hand, and looked directly at the bride. "I'm his daughter," she said, "and I have something to say." The laughter stopped. The bride's face dropped, drained of all color. Her mouth stayed open, but no words came out. Just silence. Pure, sharp silence. And that's when everything changed. You ever get that gut feeling that you shouldn't be somewhere? That tight pull in your chest that says, "Turn around"? That was me, sitting in my car outside the Ridgewood Grand Hotel, clutching an ivory invitation with gold trim and shaking hands. It came in the mail a month ago. No return address. Just my name, Almara Lane, written in neat calligraphy I didn't recognize. I almost threw it away. Who sends an ex-fiance's wedding invite to the woman he left behind? At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I thought maybe it was some weird olive branch or a test. But the truth? Deep down, I knew what it was. An announcement. A warning. A way to make sure I knew that Gavin Reese, the man I spent 6 years building a life with, was officially erasing me. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. Not since he left our apartment in the middle of the night after I lost the baby. He didn't even look back. Just said he couldn't live in sadness anymore. Packed a duffel bag, left a note, and vanished. But it wasn't just me he left. It was her too. Leela, his daughter from a woman who walked out years before we met. She was 5 when she came to live with us. From the second she held my hand and called me mommy, I stopped being just someone who loved Gavin. I became someone who belonged to her. And when Gavin left, Leela stayed. Not by accident, by choice. For months, I was a shell. Waking up felt like dragging myself through cement. The silence in our home was unbearable. Every photo, every song, every corner of the apartment held echoes of a family that barely got a chance to exist. There were days I couldn't even pick up the phone. I stopped answering friends. I stopped looking in mirrors. But I still packed Leela's lunch. I still braided her hair. I still helped her study for spelling tests while trying not to let her see me cry. One night, I was sitting on the bathroom floor shaking after yet another call from a debt collector when Leela knocked on the door. She was 10, barely up to my ribs. She pushed the door open, sat down next to me, and handed me a peanut butter sandwich. "You forgot to eat," she said. I think that was the moment I realized I wasn't alone, and if she wasn't giving up on me, I couldn't give up on myself. It took 2 years of therapy, odd jobs, and nights reading self-help books just to feel human again. But slowly I found pieces of myself I'd forgotten I had. I started designing again, websites, logos, anything I could get freelance. I moved us into a smaller place, closer to Leela's school. I even laughed again. Real belly laughs, the kind you feel in your ribs. They were rare, but they came. When the invitation arrived, I left it on the kitchen table for some days. Leela was the one who finally picked it up and read it out loud. Her voice didn't shake. "You should go," she said. "Not for him, for you." "For what?" I asked, exhausted. "So I can watch him start a new life with someone prettier, richer?" "No," she said. "So he sees what he lost." I looked at her. 16 now. Wise beyond anything I'd ever been at her age. And suddenly I realized she wasn't just talking about Gavin. She was talking about me. I was still treating myself like the broken version he left. But she saw someone stronger. So I said yes. Uncle Joe, who helped raise me after my mom passed, agreed to drive us. He never liked Gavin. Said his smile came too easily and his eyes stayed too still. I asked him to sit in the back row with me. I didn't want to be seen just there. Just visible. I didn't know what I was walking into. I expected awkwardness. Maybe a few whispers. What I didn't expect was a setup. A staged humiliation dressed in white lace and gold chandeliers. But I'll get to that. Because before the microphone was picked up, before the glasses were raised and the lies poured out like champagne, I stood in that ballroom, looked at the man I used to love, and realized something I hadn't said out loud until that day. He didn't break me. He abandoned the pieces, and I put myself back together without him. The wedding was everything you'd expect from someone desperate to prove their life was perfect. Crystal chandeliers hung like glass teardrops from the vaulted ceiling. The aisle was lined with imported white orchids. Every napkin was monogrammed. Even the string quartet seemed to play with a kind of smug precision. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, trying to keep my breathing even. Leela had already disappeared into the kitchen to report for her shift. She'd taken a job with the catering service, swearing it had nothing to do with wanting to keep an eye on me. But I knew better. She wasn't just there to serve canopies. She was there to protect me, in the quiet, fierce way she always had. I spotted Uncle Joe near the back, already seated. He gave me a short nod that said, "You're doing fine, even if it feels like hell." I slipped into the seat beside him, folded my hands in my lap, and tried not to look toward the altar. But I saw him. Gavin. He looked almost exactly the same. Broad shoulders, that stupid, practiced half smile. He was shaking hands with someone, holding a whiskey in the other. If you didn't know him, you'd think he was warm, magnetic. But I knew the quiet distance behind that smile, the way he used charm like armor. I knew what he looked like the night he left. Shallow eyes and silence. Not a single glance backward. Then I saw her. Serena Vale, all white silk and gleaming blonde hair. Laughter that was just a little too loud, a little too pointed. She leaned into Gavin like she was posing for a magazine cover. Every movement seemed choreographed to say, "Look at what I have. Look at what she never could be." They exchanged vows in front of a giant floral arch. Gavin's voice didn't waver once. I kept my head down, chewing the inside of my cheek just to stay grounded. The crowd applauded as they kissed. Serena turned toward the guests, beaming like she'd just won something. Then the reception began. Glasses clinked. Waiters flowed like clockwork through the crowd. People laughed, gossiped, admired each other's dresses. I sat quietly, sipping water, forcing myself to stay present. Leela passed by once with a tray of bruschetta. Our eyes met for a brief second. She winked. "You okay?" Uncle Joe whispered. "Still breathing," I said. Then came the toasts. Best man, maid of honor, a cousin, all the usual stories. How Gavin was a great guy. How Serena had turned him into a better man. I almost managed to tune it out until I heard her voice. "I want to say something." It was Serena standing at the head table holding a flute of champagne. Her eyes sparkled in the lights, but there was something sharper behind them. She didn't look at Gavin, she looked at the crowd and then at me. When I met Gavin, he was a good man, but he was hurt, damaged, by someone who didn't know how to love him right. A woman who was too broken to see how lucky she was. I froze, my skin flushed hot and cold at the same time. The words hit me like a slap in a silent room. She almost ruined him. Serena continued with a laugh so light it made my stomach churn. But I saved him. I healed him. And today, he's finally where he belongs. Laughter followed. Real laughter. People toasted. Glasses clinked. A few even clapped. Uncle Joe muttered something under his breath. I couldn't move. Every part of me screamed to stand up, to speak, to scream even. But I didn't. I just stared at her. This woman who knew nothing about the nights I held Gavin's hand while he cried about losing custody of Leela. Nothing about the mornings I woke up early to write cover letters for his job search. Nothing about the ultrasound photo I buried in the back of my drawer, the one I never got to frame. She didn't save him. She just arrived after he'd already run. And that's when I noticed a movement near the kitchen. One of the waitresses had stopped walking. She was staring directly at Serena, her jaw tight, fists clenched. It was Leela. She stepped forward, shaking but steady, and began to walk, past the tables, past the clinking glasses straight toward the mic. I watched her shoulders rise and fall. Then she took off her server's cap, held it in her hand, and said in a voice louder than I'd ever heard from her, "I'm his daughter, and I have something to say." The room fell dead silent, and I knew, in that moment, the night was far from over. "I'm his daughter, and I have something to say." Leela's voice cut through the room like glass on polished marble. Every champagne flute froze mid-air. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. The silence was thick, confused, electric. People turned in their chairs. Some whispered. Serena's smile twitched, her hand still frozen around her glass. Gavin turned slowly in his seat, staring at the girl in the black apron and white button-up shirt who had just unmasked every lie he'd built this night upon. Leela stood beside the dance floor, her cap clutched tightly in her hands. Her curls had fallen loose from her bun. Her chest rose and fell as if each breath had to be pulled from somewhere deeper. "She's not just the woman you're mocking," she said, her voice cracking at the edges. "She's the woman who raised me." Serena blinked, confused. "Wait, what?" "I'm Gavin's daughter," Leela said again. "From before he met you. From before he ran away. From before he pretended we didn't exist." The air changed. A few people gasped. I saw one of Gavin's cousins slowly lower his phone, like he wasn't sure if he should keep filming. Leela took a step forward. She wasn't reading from a speech. This wasn't planned. But it was truth. And it had weight. "He left when I was 11. Not just my mom. He left me. Didn't call. Didn't write. Just disappeared. And you want to call her broken?" Her eyes flicked to Serena, who looked suddenly very unsure of her footing. "I watched her work 2 jobs so I could have food. I watched her cry in silence so I wouldn't hear. And when people asked me where my father was, I said he was away on business because I didn't want anyone to know he chose not to love us." Someone near the front covered their mouth. A waiter stopped walking, tray hovering mid-air. Gavin finally spoke. His voice was low, cautious. "Leela. Not here." "Oh. Now you remember my name," Leela snapped, stepping closer. "Here's a powerful rephrased version with smoother flow, stronger emotion, and high storytelling impact. When I sent you birthday cards, they came back unopened. When I emailed you to tell you I missed you, you never replied. You didn't even block me. You just chose to ignore me. And now you're standing here, letting this woman talk about my mom like she's nothing." He finally looked at me, and for the first time, his expression cracked. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. I wasn't the one who should be ashamed. "She didn't break you," Leela continued, her voice trembling but growing stronger. "You broke yourself. And then you tried to erase us like we never existed." Serena glanced around, searching for anyone to back her up. But no one moved. She turned to Gavin. "Is that true?" He said nothing. He just stared at his daughter, like a stranger had just walked in carrying his last chance. Leela walked toward me. Each step hit like thunder in my chest. She reached for my hand. I stood, holding onto her, and in that quiet moment, something inside me finally woke up. Not anger. Not pain. "She didn't come here to fight," Leela said, turning back toward the crowd. "She came here because I told her to, because I wanted her to see that she doesn't need to hide anymore." Then she looked straight at Serena, calm, steady. "She doesn't need to be invited into a room to belong in it, and no one gets to rewrite our story to make themselves look better." The room held its breath. Serena's hand trembled around her champagne flute. "This is crazy," she mumbled. She's trying to ruin my wedding." Leela raised her chin. "You ruined it the second you built it on lies." Then she turned and walked away, pulling me with her. The crowd slowly parted. Whispers rose like smoke. No one stopped us. No one dared. Behind me, I heard Gavin call out once, "Leela," but she didn't even turn. Outside, the air was cool and still. Leela exhaled hard, like she'd been holding in the truth her whole life. She looked up at me, teary-eyed but smiling. "I wasn't going to let her humiliate you," she said. "Not after everything." "You didn't have to do that," I whispered. "Yes," she said. "I did. You saved me." It was time I returned the favor. And in that moment, I realized the strongest love stories aren't always romantic. Some are built in silence, in healing, in survival. Some are born the moment a child decides to protect the person who never stopped protecting them. We hadn't even made it halfway down the hallway when someone behind us called out, sharp and panicked. "Wait!" It was Serena. She'd followed us out of the ballroom, dress trailing like a shredded veil of pride behind her. Her perfect curls bounced as she quickened her steps, but she didn't look perfect anymore. Her mascara had begun to smudge. Her hands were shaking. For the first time that night, she looked real and scared. Leela turned around first. I stayed still, unsure what this woman could possibly say that would matter now. You can't just do that, Serena snapped. You can't just hijack my wedding and humiliate us, Leela said, eyebrows raised. I didn't say anything that wasn't true. You could have handled it privately. No, I said, stepping forward. You could have handled it privately. But instead, you stood in a room full of strangers and tried to turn me into a villain. Serena blinked. Her eyes darted between us, looking for some foothold she'd lost. I didn't know he had a daughter. I didn't know he. Did you ask? Leela interrupted. Or did you just believe the story that made you feel superior? Serena opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Then Gavin appeared behind her, his jacket unbuttoned, tie hanging loose. His expression was different now. Not cold, not composed, just exposed. Leela, he said quieter this time. I never meant for this to happen. She turned to him slowly. Which part? Me being born? You abandoning me? Or watching someone else raise me while you vanished? He flinched. I thought I was protecting you, he mumbled. You thought disappearing was protection. He looked at me then, the first direct eye contact since we'd arrived. I was broken, Amara, he said. You know I was. I was too, I answered. But I didn't leave. And there it was. The sentence that changed the air between us. Because no matter how many years had passed, no matter how many ways he tried to reframe it, he knew it was true. He ran. I stayed. I can't take it back, he said quietly. No, I said. You can't. Leela's voice broke the silence again. You know what I used to tell myself? That you were dead. That maybe something happened to you and that's why you didn't come. Because the truth, that you were alive and just didn't care, was worse. Gavin's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked down at the floor at his feet, at the trail of choices he tried to forget. And then, something happened I didn't expect. Leela stepped forward. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just looked him in the eye and said, I forgive you. He looked up startled. Not for you, she said, for me, because carrying your absence has been exhausting. I'm done, he swallowed hard, nodding. One size glassy, you're incredible, you know. That she smiled soft and sad. I know she made me that way. She pointed to me, and that moment, that simple gesture, was louder than any mic drop. It was the truth laid bare, with no glitter, no wine, no forced smiles, just a daughter choosing her mother in front of the man who had left them both. Serena stepped back, arms folded. So what now? You just walk away and pretend you didn't wreck the night? Leela tilted her head. You wrecked it the moment you tried to build it on lies. And I added, if you wanted a perfect story, you should have picked someone with nothing to hide. We walked past them, out into the night. The sky was wide and deep above us. Clouds stretched like pulled cotton. It had started to drizzle, but none of us cared. The kind of storm we'd just weathered couldn't be measured in weather. Uncle Joe was waiting by the car. He looked at us, at Gavin still frozen in the entryway, and nodded slowly. Guess that's what you'd call a mic drop moment. Leela laughed, and I joined her. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't forced. It was real. In that moment, I felt light. Not because anything had been fixed, not because Gavin finally understood what he lost, but because I knew who I was. And Leela knew who she was. And now, so did everyone else. The next morning, the headlines started to spread. Not in the tabloids or newspapers, but in the way these things move now. Quiet clips on TikTok. Grainy wedding footage posted anonymously. Short videos titled, Waitress shuts down bride's insult with epic speech. I didn't watch them. I didn't need to. I had lived it. People messaged me, friends I hadn't heard from in years. Some apologized for losing touch when things fell apart. Others just said, you were so brave. But the funny thing is, I didn't feel brave. Not really. Not in the spotlight. Not when Serena mocked me, and not even when Leela stood up and told the truth. I felt like someone who had finally stopped trying to disappear. Gavin never followed up. No phone call, no apology, no last-ditch effort to explain himself. I think he knew there was nothing left to explain. His story was written in the silence that followed his absence. And we were done reading it. Serena's name popped up in the gossip circles for a week or two, enough to make it clear she'd become the punchline of her own party. I heard from someone at the venue that she left the reception early and never came back for the honeymoon send-off. Apparently, she moved out within the month. Whether they broke up or stayed together, I didn't care. Because this story was never really about them. It was about us, me and Leela, and what we became when the people who were supposed to protect us left. After that night, something shifted in our home. It was quiet but powerful. Leela was different, stronger. She walked taller. She didn't apologize for taking up space. I caught her practicing her speech in the mirror one night, not out of vanity but preparation. She told me she was thinking about starting a podcast. For girls who think they don't have a voice, she said. And me? I started something too. I'd always been afraid to talk publicly about what happened. There's shame in being left. People look at you like you're contagious, like your pain is a warning. But after the wedding, I realized something. I wasn't weak because I broke. I was strong because I rebuilt. So I started writing again. First just notes, then essays. I sent one to a parenting blog. It got published. The comments poured in. Mothers, daughters, women I'd never met, all saying the same thing: thank you for saying what I couldn't say out loud. That turned into a blog, then a small community group. A few months later, I registered a nonprofit. The Second Thread, a space for women healing from abandonment, divorce, emotional abuse. We host circles, provide counseling, help them write their stories, literally and figuratively. I didn't expect it to become what it did. I just wanted to offer women a space where silence wasn't the only option. But the most powerful part of all of this wasn't the public closure. It was a quiet moment in our kitchen. One night in mid-January, I was washing dishes. Leela sat at the counter, flipping through her notebook, legs swinging off the stool. She looked up at me and said, out of nowhere, I used to wish my real mom had stayed. My hands paused in the sink. But now I get it, she said. Maybe she left because I was supposed to end up with you. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just turned around, dried my hands, and pulled her into a hug so tight I think I breathed her in. Sometimes life doesn't give you the story you thought you wanted. Sometimes it tears pages out mid-chapter and leaves you to guess the ending. But sometimes when you fight, when you love hard, when you stay, you get something better. You get to write a new story. And the best part? You don't need anyone's permission to start. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own strength or the power of someone who stood by you when others didn't, take a second and give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear that broken doesn't mean worthless. Thank you. If you want more true stories that hit deep, that remind you you're not alone, make sure to subscribe to the channel. New stories drop every week and they're all about resilience, truth, and the messy beauty of being human. Thanks for watching. And remember, you don't need to be invited into someone's fairy tale when you're already writing your own.